to put some of the things I've been saying into context and to reiterate some of the points that we've made by previous speakers, 70% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa are under 30. And I don't know how anybody else here feels that just because you're born in Africa doesn't mean you're any less of a person or have any less intelligence or have any less capability about giving people an opportunity to be their best selves, and as a result of that, giving every community its opportunity to be its best self. 60% of the total unemployed in sub-Saharan Africa are the youth. And someone says, well, what does that mean, that the youth? The people who are the future of this continent. So again, what we're about is creating opportunities for those people, and digital infrastructure, it creates opportunities for those people. One thing that's, I think is very, that this isn't the way to go, and fibre isn't the way to go. I'm just saying fibre isn't always the only solution that's out there. That 341 million people live outside fibre connectivity, so we have to find other ways of getting to them. I'm not saying satellite is the only way, I'm saying satellite is one of the ways. And I'm saying that there's certain other platforms out there that provide an economic way of actually doing it. And so from that perspective, what we're trying to do at Avanti is create a new model, a new way of deploying satellite infrastructure in a way that allows people to do what they want to do as far as internet connectivity is concerned, as far as driving business growth, as far as driving social development. That's what, at the end of the day, we're about. Yes, we're about creating jobs, yes, we're about doing business, but at the end of the day, it's what the infrastructure does to the community that makes the difference. You can have all the infrastructure in the world, if it's not making a difference, it doesn't mean anything. And to reiterate the point that my previous colleague made, 10% growth in broadband access delivers 1.4% growth in GDP. And I'm just going to rest on that for a moment because that is huge. 10% growth in broadband access is equivalent to 1.4%. And we already know that the vast majority of them do not have that access. So we're missing an opportunity there. And when we look at what's available, all the technologies are there, they're available, you can access them. Are the economics right for all of them? It's not for me to say. However, what I am saying is that all of them are there and we have to find ways to exploit them, and satellite infrastructure is one of them. The advantage of satellite infrastructure, it can exist and operate in all the environments highlighted there, right from in conurbations right to the most rural of areas. So what we're basically saying is the way we deploy satellite infrastructure, the way we roll it out, allows you to create change and drive change in all of your communities. There are things that we do in terms of how we put together our technology that allows for all types of different commercial models to be attributed to a community that people want. Some of the programs that we're involved with, for example, we have a program called Imalango. Imalango is an educational program, and we put infrastructure in schools and we provide content to those schools to support educational growth. Now, one of the ways that this is developed is by deploying that infrastructure to provide broadband access. So is integrating that with Wi-Fi infrastructure as well. So in the surrounding area of the school, up to 1 kilometre away, we can provide internet access to anybody who has a Wi-Fi enabled device. So it's one part of closing the digital divide. What we're also doing through the deployment of this sort of infrastructure is training people in ICT capability. One of the things that we recognise is developing local capacity is key towards growing the ICT infrastructure and ICT business anyway. It's not going to be handed out and just dumped, and then people just say, well, what's going on here? What we have to do is to develop the capacity in the locations to support the infrastructure. I think that's it. So I suppose my final points on what I'm trying to say as far as Avanti and satellite infrastructure is concerned is that there are many, many ways to skin a cat. It's not always just been about fibre, it's not always just been about LTE, it's not always just been about GSM. But what it does say, if we can bring all these things together and put them together in a way that is economically viable, and bring them in a way that is economically attractive, then closing the digital divide and making broadband infrastructure available to everybody is an achievable goal. And closing the gap in the short term is very much achievable. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clint. Any questions or comments for Clint? Are there any other correlations like the one you mentioned? More broadband leads to increased GDP. So are there any other such very interesting findings that you've come across?
Yeah, there's loads of findings from World Bank, from African Development Bank that talk about broadband infrastructure as being an enabler for social development and growth. The evidence is out there. I mean, the presentation from my last colleague suggested that where you provide education, you're already creating jobs just by providing education. If you provide internet access, you get access to those jobs. So one leads to the other, and one supports the other. So there's absolutely no question that it makes sense.
So very amplifying, cascading.
Absolutely. It's a trickle down and trickle up effect.
Trickle up effect. Great, okay. Clint also is going to be joining us in the panel discussion immediately after this. So could you maybe take a seat over there on the chair in the corner, and let me ask our panelists to come up also. We have Kojo Borke, Deputy Director of the Alliance for Affordable Internet. Let me invite Kojo to come up on stage. We also have Yawi Atahun from ICANN. Yawi, will you please come up on stage? And also Mortimer Hope, the Director for Africa for GSM, will you please come up on stage? I think the other two speakers are on their way, but the two of you can get a good conversation started. So will you please come up on stage, and let me ask my colleagues to get in touch with Kojo and Yawi. So till then, the panel is on digital and inclusive economies, and as you can see, Clint and Mortimer are on stage already, and the floor is yours now, Clint. You can start off with the discussion. The aim of this panel is to talk about issues such as affordable accesses and partnerships between government and state sector and so on. Yeah, please. Yeah, sure. Great. And this here. Great. Okay, good. So we have a full panel now. So we have Clint, Kojo, Yawi, and Mortimer on stage now for the next 45 minutes to tell us about what's happening with digital and inclusive economies. Topics of discussion are what are the kinds of gaps that there are, how can partnerships overcome these gaps, what are some hybrid models that work, and so on. So, floor is yours, Clint, all over to you.
Thanks very much. As you've probably noticed from my presentation, I have a commercial as well as emotional interest in closing the digital divide, and I'm just going to ask a couple of questions of the panel, and I'm hoping that there'll be some questions that come from the floor as well. But to kick things off, what do you think are the things that are happening out there at the moment which are the best examples of nations working to close the digital divide? So.
Thank you very much. If you permit, first I would like to talk about ICANN in 1 second. I'm sure you will need to know more about ICANN. I'm from ICANN, and ICANN is the organization in charge of the management of IP addresses, domain names, and protocol parameters. Most of the time as end users, we don't, maybe we may not need to know that. When we need internet, we have providers, but just to inform you that it's very, very important to know what is happening. So coming back to your question, ICANN is also trying to see how to promote development of the digital economy. We had a study, maybe I'll talk about that more in detail later, by a firm called BCG. And the key findings from this study is there are some main elements that cause e-friction. What we call e-friction are the barriers that are blocking countries to in the development of the digital economy. So one key is the infrastructures, as we did in your presentation. So infrastructure in that way, that is what we think is very important to enable access to have people access the internet. So without internet is very, very, without infrastructure is very critical to talk about digital economy. And also we have also the importance of the industry. So one of the findings is that countries where we have more companies using internet, we have more of development of the digital economy. So we have also the industry. And also we have the information, availability of information. So in the previous session, people talk about local content. So the information is general, is very important. And also we talk about individuals, because even if you have access, we have internet, we have infrastructures, people should be able to use information. So briefly, this is what I want to say, to share to start.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hope, as Director of the GSMA, I mean, you do some pretty interesting research on universal access and how we've actually rolled it out throughout Africa. What's your view?
I believe Mortimer has some slides. Dennis, can you bring up the presentation by Mortimer Hope?
While we're waiting on that, thank you very much. So, universal access funds have been established in a number of countries in Africa with varying levels of success. We have some countries where the funds have been collected for many years and are lying idle. We have some other countries that have put the funds to very good use. And an example is Tanzania, where they would identify an unserved area, invite the operators to bid for funds from the Universal Service Fund, and then they would build the infrastructure in that area. So we have extremes, but what we would propose is that those funds that already exist, they need to become more efficient and put the funds to use that they were intended for.
Okay. So you work with the Digital Alliance, the Internet Affordable Alliance. So how is that group working to close the digital divide?
I actually work for the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is AFRIA. We only have about 45 minutes, so I'm mindful of how short time is. I'm going to follow my learned colleague from ICANN and give you a very quick overview of what AFRIA does. So AFRIA is the world's largest and broadest alliance of stakeholders seeking to make internet and broadband affordable. We do global research, global advocacy on this issue, because we understand that one of the major barriers, or the major barrier, is the fact that internet is unaffordable to a large majority of our people. We work across 6 countries, including Nigeria. Nigeria was the first country to sign up to the alliance. We have a coalition working in Nigeria, led by, as many of you, a gentleman many of you will know, which is Dr. Ernest Ndukwe, working on a range of issues, trying to propose policy and regulatory recommendations to this challenge of affordability. I think the first question Clint posed was really, where have we seen good examples of policy and regulatory practices which will actually increase access? Nigeria is one of those countries. So if we point to a strong broadband plan that outlays a roadmap for how we will achieve increased access, Nigeria wanted to go from between 2013 to 2018, wanted to increase broadband access from around 6% to 30%. Under the former minister, Dr. Omobola Johnson, who is now chair of the alliance, it outlaid a strong broadband plan. That for us is an example of good practice, the fact that we have a plan in place. I think some of the discussion in yesterday's meeting was around implementation of those plans. And many Africans will tell you that we in West Africa, perhaps less so in East Africa, which was one of the arguments yesterday, are capable of coming up with the most spectacular plans. Our challenge is implementation. Where have we seen good practices in respect of implementation? Well, this year's affordability report, which I encourage you all to read, points to Latin America, where countries such as Colombia, such as Chile, such as Mexico most recently, have outlined and implemented strong broadband plans, where their leaders, both in government and the ICT sector, have shown their understanding that policy and regulation is what will drive affordability. So they've looked at how we reduce taxation in the sector. They've looked at, as Mortimer has explained, how their universal service funds can be used most efficiently. And there are examples, as Mortimer said, of how they can be used efficiently. And they've looked at issues such as infrastructure sharing, such as effective spectrum management, so it's not a cash cow, such as providing public access. So this is one of the things I want to make very, very clear. We're now at a stage in the development of this sector where we have countless examples of what works. Countless examples of what works and what's effective. Now, there's no blueprint that every country should follow, but with all those examples, including those that are homegrown, those from Nigeria, those from Tanzania, those from Uganda, South Africa in some instances, we can now develop our own blueprints for implementing and increasing broadband, increasing levels of affordability, and indeed increasing access.
Thank you. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, since you sort of lighted on the universal access funds, how are those funds, where you talked about them being used effectively, what sort of models are they putting in place to use those funds effectively?
Well, for us, is the contribution model that is used. So in most countries, it's a percentage of revenue that's contributed to the fund. The issue that the GSMA has with these funds is the usage. So sometimes the funds are used for other things. Like for instance, could be used for something completely unrelated to communications. That was not the intended purpose of the fund. So we would advocate that if a fund exists, then it should be used to extend networks to underserved areas. That's the intention of the fund.
Okay. Thank you. And Kojo?
I don't know. I think adding to Mortimer's point, I think A3I has released a paper very recently after GSMA's paper, actually, which argued that GSMA is absolutely right, that some of these funds are inefficient. They've collected millions, and in some very, very scary cases, billions, and not invested that money in the sector. But we're also mindful of where the idea of universal service funds came from, and perhaps most importantly, what they're designed for, and that's to correct market failures, which happen. I have, in Ghana, I have family members that live in the village, and they will have to walk to a particular part of the village in order for me to call, on those rare occasions when I have time to call. And part of that for us is a market failure, in that the private sector, for whatever reason, and there are many reasons why not, it's not always the private sector's fault, have not been able to provide infrastructural services in that particular area. For that reason, universal service funds, when done properly, as Mortimer said, in Tanzania, in Malaysia, where it helps increase broadband access from 30% to 60% in 4 years, universal service funds are necessary. How do they work well? Good plans, access gap studies to understand exactly where the gaps are, working with the private sector to give the private sector the right level of investment for them to go and invest, and then the monitoring and evaluation which makes them effective and which helps us quickly identify where the plans, the connectivity projects, etc. are failing, and then enables us to correct them.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So we focus mostly on extending the networks, but there is another issue we need to consider. It's that some taxation issues, some taxes that are imposed on services on devices that we think governments need to consider removing or at least reducing those taxes in order to make services more affordable.
That's an interesting point. We'll pick that up in a second. So, from your perspective as a stakeholder, what do you see as the challenges that have been illustrated by our colleagues?
What I see in Africa is, on paper in all the countries, I see we still we are talking about universal access funds, but in reality it's not happening because you can see, and my colleagues will agree with me that in practice, these funds are most of the time served for other things. So I think that we need some other stakeholders from the country, from the community, to contribute to the real destination of these funds. So that is something very important. We need to keep doing awareness to the global community so that they know that this fund is for something different than what is being used for currently. So this is my point.
So we talked about universal access funds. We talked about some of the policy, the political components of what this needs to be. So what are the real gaps that are out there in terms of closing the digital divide and making digital access as an issue a thing of the past?
Okay. I'm just going to focus on some of the key points we are making in ICANN, for example. We believe that the internet is an industry, the domain name system, because it is what we are doing basically. It's an industry, but in Africa we see that this industry is not really industry. The reasons are most of the countries today, if I just take an example of the country code, which is something related to the domain names. Most of the end users, they don't know too much about the various options available for the domain names, which are very important for the digital economy. Most of the time, people just go and consult like service providers, and these people, most of the time, they know about some few domain name extensions. But today at ICANN, we have a lot of choices available for the users, apart the country code, which we are at the same time promoting. So it is very important today to do more awareness about what the domain name can help to do to bring the gap between the developing country and the developed countries. So what we are trying to do today, we are trying to help the countries, like we have high-level people in this meeting. We still have in some countries where we have the country codes. It's like the country top-level people, they don't mind about the country top-level domain code. That is something very important because the previous speakers, they talk about local content. They talk about internet exchange point. The reason is that we want to have local traffic local. So if you have content, we have local content. The situation today is that we have most of this local content, they are not hosted within the country. That is clear. And for many reasons. When people produce content, they want to host content outside the country. One reason is that it is more easy to access. In many countries, most cases, it's more easy to access the content hosted outside the country. But I'm saying that people are trying to correct the situation. So we need to improve the situation so that even if you have local content, this content are hosted locally. So when the content are hosted locally, it's the only way for us to use the exchange point so that people can have access to this content, even if you have the connection issue that we are trying to also solve.
So it sounds to me like you're saying it's not just transmission, it's also storage and data capability, management of data that's the key. Kojo, from your perspective, how do you see the other gaps that are in the marketplace?
I think the gaps are obvious to everybody. I personally, when you have in this country 10% of users having a broadband connection and 40% being users have used in the last 3 months, whatever the stat is, that's the digital divide personified. opportunities, creating services, outsourcing companies, growing and being competitive globally. How does that happen when 10% of your country, or 10% of people in your country have broadband access, and you go to countries like Finland, South Korea, the UK, where 70% have, in those countries higher, but where a minimum of 70% of people have broadband access, and people are screaming as to why the number is so low. That for us is the gap. Where does the gap sit in respect of affordability? Nigeria, Rwanda, South African countries have performed really well in implementing or trying to implement the right policies in order to achieve what the UN says is the broadband target, which is that everybody or nobody should pay more than 5% of connection. Average income includes the cab driver who dropped me here from the airport and Dangote's income. So that in itself is inaccurate. But the gap there lies in that Nigeria now stands on the cusp of that affordability target, 5.4%. But you go to the leading countries and it's less than 1% of average income people are paying. That is a huge gap. And the scary thing is, for Nigeria and for other countries, is that rather than continually working to close that gap, we're now in danger of increasing that gap in some countries. So in Nigeria, in Ecuador, in El Salvador, what we've seen most recently are gestures to actually increase taxation in this sector. So I want to quickly ask, if you don't mind,
absolutely, yeah.
How many of the audience, and I hope you were all listening, how many of the audience are very happy with what you pay for your telecom services and broadband services now? Can I just quickly get a show of hands? Who's happy?
I say yes, raise your hands.
If you don't mind. Indulge me. Can I?
Yeah,
the gentleman here is happy. So 1 out of about 150, which is shy team. Who here would tolerate a 9 or be happy for a 9 or 10% increase in what you're paying now? Who here would be unhappy if you were told tomorrow there would be a 10% increase in what you're paying for your services now? Thank you. At least I know some people are listening. So there are people here who would be unhappy with a 9% increase in what you're paying now. But are you aware that there is a bill being passed through Parliament which suggests that you will pay an additional 9% on your services? How many of you are aware of this? And thank you. Some learned friends. How many of you have spoken against this? 1 person, 2, 3 people. So what we're seeing now is the gap is there, and I've mentioned the gap, I've mentioned access, I've mentioned affordability, and I've mentioned efforts, laudable efforts to close that gap. But what we're seeing in some countries is that gap might be opened again. So just using Nigeria as an example, because its bill is so pertinent, so close to being passed. Now on the cusp of an affordability target, 5.4% of average income. We know many Nigerians don't even earn average income, so it's completely unaffordable to them. And just as Nigeria is on the cusp of this UN target, just as it's about to achieve that UN target, there are now proposals to increase taxation on services, which is not a progressive tax. That's services across the board. Everybody from your grandmother in the village to Dangote will now pay an additional 9% on services. And that for us is one of the major gaps in thinking, in how we might move forward, in how we might close this digital divide, in how we might, as the World Bank would term it, reap the digital dividends. Clint, you've mentioned this stat that's used so often. 10% increase in broadband access creates a 1.38% increase in GDP. Wonderful stat, true, very helpful for those of us who believe in the power of the internet. But what has been the actual dividend reaped by most of the people? And the argument has been put very well by the World Bank is that dividend isn't being reaped by the people, and it's because of policies like an increase in taxation that hits everybody.
Thank you. Also, your view.
Yes, I'd like to jump in a bit here on what Kojo mentioned about the increase in taxation on the mobile sector. So what we've noticed is that it will be an easy target. So it's there, we're not going anywhere. And some do yield to that temptation of increasing increasing taxation on the sector only, and we think that taxation should be a general application, so like VAT, which applies across the board to all sectors. It should not be sector-specific taxation. So that's what's wrong in many African countries. They impose sector-specific taxes on the mobile industry.
Okay. So, sorry.
Someone called me about tax.
Apologies for that. So, we talked about the Universal Access Fund, we talked about some of the gaps, we talked about the impact that policy can have. So, what do you think the private sector can actually do to allay some of these advances that are taking place?
I think that the role of the private sector is very, very important in this digital economy, especially for Africa. We see, if I come back to the mining industry again, the private sector is quite inexistent in Africa. But to move, to have a growth in this sector, we need a very private sector. If I talk about the domain name system, if I talk about the generic domain name, for example, the .com, .org, etc., and today we have new generic top-level domain, like we'll have more than 1,000 new extensions. So the role is played by the private sector, because only if we take the country code, we have the multi-stakeholder model, where we have the civil society at the country level, the government, the university, together in some countries to manage the CCTLDs. But when we talk about the generic top-level domain, the .com, .org, .info, etc., is the private sector who has a very important role to play. Especially if we raise the issues before, like the infrastructures, etc. The private sector has a very, very important role to play. If you don't have access to, people don't have access. Government only cannot do that, and we think that private sector has a very, very important role to play.
And Mortimer, your view?
The private sector is mostly profit-driven, but they also need to be socially conscious that they operate in society. Society needs to improve, and they have a role to play. So, just by extending networks beyond the cities, the private sector will be playing its part in increasing digital inclusion.
Okay, Jim?
I'm always struck when I come to Nigeria by how entrepreneurial, actually, it's not even when I come to Nigeria. Living in London, being in Ghana, my friends are Nigerian, my friends are Ghanaian, etc. But the Nigerian guys and girls are some of the most entrepreneurial that I know. And I think that reputation precedes them. It's indicative or evidence in Nigeria of what the private sector's role is, I think. It's to go and do what they've been doing today, which is to continue to provide access, to continue to create innovative business models that stimulate demand. We know, and we've heard throughout the last day a bit, that what they need is an enabling environment to do that, the right policy and regulatory environment, the right relationship, which in our opinion shouldn't be an antagonistic one, but it should be a collaborative one. We hear PPP everywhere. PPP. What do PPPs look like when they're effective? Well, they're a collaborative private sector, a collaborative seeking government as well, all doing their role. I was in Latin America recently, and it's remarkable where they are in terms of their development here. They've gone to some extent past where we are in terms of they've got certain levels of access, 50%, 60%, and they're now seeking to do what some of our speakers this morning have spoken about, which is to create the kind of markets and services, etc., that will then drive their next stage of development. And one of the points I made is that, again, can I ask the audience, who knows who Cristiano Ronaldo is? Anybody? Who knows who Lionel Messi is? Anybody? Fine. Would you ask Lionel Messi to play centre back of your football team, the central defender, or will you ask him to be your striker? Those who know. Striker or defender? Striker. Because that's his position. For me, for us, the private sector should be given the opportunity to go out and do what they do best, which is to invest, is to seek these market opportunities, Yes, we're a social conscience, but for that you need to have the right policy regulatory environment, and that's what we try to push. That's what we try to help our countries to achieve, and that's what they should be doing.
Brilliant. I want to welcome you up to the floor now, because I think we've already started to sort of generate some audience participation. So does anybody have any questions for the panel?
Yeah, we have a couple of mics. Can we have first row, and then I'll take you, and then
Good morning, Bradley Shaw here from Ubongo. Questions for Mortimer and for Kojo. In the talking about the Universal Services Funds, public participation, is there space in the market for private networks to be set up and invested in by the private sector, and then have that network leased back to the operators? It's an innovative model that's being used in a number of countries globally, and I'm not seeing it in Africa. I'm just curious to know why there's not more infrastructure sharing taking place, and why those kind of models are not being implemented here on the continent. Thanks.
What do you think about that? Let's take the next question also. Yeah, pass the mic to our friend here.
Okay, good morning. My name is Usio. I'm a member of the ICT Development Forum in Abuja. I just want to put this question through to the ICANN Operations Manager. We are looking at digital inclusive economics, and Kojo has said things around the enabling operating environment. And then we are striving towards making Africa a hub for ICT innovations, and as much as possible, talking about innovation here. We're looking at the environment, the enabled environment to meet or to really align with the fast-growing digital the activities all around, whether infrastructure or whether services and all the rest. But I'm trying to put this in a way. You mentioned about the CCTLD, Internet of Things coming up, IPv4 to IPv6 and all that. Right now, statistics we have shows that up to 20% of our enterprise services are not even ready to embrace ICT of Things. They are not ready to embrace IPv4. They are not even happy about it. ICANN is here. You are the operations manager to engage stakeholders. You have not pretty much, there are groups that have come together to say, okay, let's push forth to make our infrastructure ready for this. In fact, let's make our platform very ready, or our services ready to achieve this. But ICANN, which is also the body serving responsibility to make sure that these people are bring up to speed, have not so much done a lot. I have not even created a platform. I just see packets of people meeting. I have seen several IPv4 meetings and all that. But the real guys who needs to be on the table, who needs to ensure that these things really work, or these things are practically in place, have not been given the opportunity. So I'm just putting that to you. So how much have you done to see the Internet of Things work in core enterprise services and IPv4, IPv6 transition? Thank you.
Okay, good. So that's a question for Mortimer, a question for ICANN, and let's see who the other question is for. Yeah, can you pass the mic to our friend here, the mic chair?
Yeah, I'm very much interested in Alliance for Affordable Internet. In fact, in Internet Governance Caucus, where I belong, we have a heated argument over what that alliance is doing regarding internet affordability. In fact, a lot of members of that caucus are of the view that we have to be talking about free internet access, especially in developing and least developed countries. The reason is because a lot of members of communities can't even, because we looked at the 5% of, income. Yeah, that's UN proposal. And we discovered that 5% is so high. Even 1% in a lot of countries is still high. Because with 1%, a lot of people will still remain unconnected, will still remain offline. So what we are talking about is that In fact, when we looked at affordable internet report, the report that were released lately, we discovered that certain corrections were made there in terms of the direction we are going. And we are happy for that. So what we are saying is that a lot of communities need free internet access, and governments have to play a lot of role in providing free internet access. And that takes me to Universal Service Fund. Now, that Universal Service Fund, we have a lot of problems with the way it works. Now, in Nigeria, there's a report somebody brought up in that caucus that the fund is given to private operators, commercial operators, and these commercial operators don't actually produce expected results. The reason is simple. They are profit-oriented, like you mentioned. And because they are profit-oriented, they can't get interested in going to communities that they can't get customers after investing. So you see that when you give them the funds, they invest the funds, and the funds will eventually be wasted. So what we are trying to say is that the Universal Service Fund management should think about working with communities. You know, because there should be this assessment. These communities have to be worked with so that you know their needs. You know, in fact, a lot of people don't even need internet. I don't know whether we are aware of this truth, because they don't know why they should even connect to the internet. So, and when you now go to such places and establish internet connectivity infrastructure, the infrastructure will be a colossal waste. So what we are saying is that Universal Service Funds have to be used in a way that the government and other stakeholders have to work together with the communities, identify the needs of the communities, identify what the communities actually, the input they can make, so that when this fund is used, the community can sustainably run the infrastructure that will be set up. In fact, we advocated for community owned internet connectivity infrastructure.
That's a great point. So we've got 3 questions there.
We're talking about.
One question for each of them.
We've got 3 questions. We've got a question around the business model and around build and lease back. We've got a question around the Internet of Things and are we ready for it? And we've got another question around free internet access. Is it an achievable model? Who's free internet access for? Guys, I mean, you've got some challenges there. Do you want to start off, Kojo?
The first one on sharing, time is short, so we can talk offline about the exact model that you're talking about. But we're seeing sharing. We've seen members of GSMA will tell you that the model for rolling out or using base stations has changed completely. We now have the Helios towers and American towers of this world that basically lease the space of the towers to the operators. That's in infrastructure sharing. Where we might, the reason why we might not see it in other aspects of infrastructure, I guess, when you talk offline, you might be talking about fiber, etc. For us, has been that in some cases the guidelines, I like to think guidelines because regulation scares some people, but guidelines, and in some cases the regulations for us haven't incentivized those infrastructure providers and users in that country enough. But we are seeing models of shared infrastructure with mobile operators, with fiber companies as well, when managed or run on an open access basis, transparent pricing, same regulated pricing for everybody. We are seeing it. The commercial nature of sharing in the mobile sector is probably what's required for fiber, probably will come. But to say that you haven't seen it on the continent, we can talk offline and I can give you some examples. And I think they're set to increase as well. You have other players coming into the sector. I know Google has an interest in this area, running it on an open access basis. I know Facebook has an interest in this area, as well as many other players, including A4AI members such as Main One, who are more than happy to share and use their infrastructure here, and others. So we are seeing sharing. Can I quickly speak to the other ones as well? Yeah, sure. So on Universal Service Funds, sir, we have to catch up as well, because I'm disappointed I'm disappointed in myself that I haven't drawn you into our conversation in Nigeria. So for you and your colleagues in the internet governance area to be speaking about so many of the things that are important to us, the UN target, which is 5%, in our report this year, again, encouraging all of you to have a look at the affordability report 2015-2016, we say that that 5% target is basically obsolete, does not work. And what we actually need is a new target, which we call 1 for 2. So for 2% of average income, users should be able to have an entry-level broadband connection of 1 gig, not 500 meg. 500 meg for a month is not enough. Even 1 gig for many of us will use in a day or two. So 2% of average income for 1 meg, we feel that will bring, through our analysis in the report, as you've probably seen, will bring many, many more people online. So we're actually advocating this year to remove that 5% target, which is very, very important to us. You also spoke about universal service funds and the role of universal service funds. And I think you're absolutely right that there needs to be more analysis done, as I mentioned earlier, by universal service funds. They can do that through access gap studies. I know Nigeria has done one, South Africa has done one, Kenya has done one, where you actually look at what's required for investment in a particular locality in terms of capex and opex. How long will that locality require an operational subsidy to be provided to major private sector players or indeed community run networks in order for that demand to be sustainable. And your questions about whether internet should be provided for free are very, very pertinent at the moment. I know many of you would have read about India banning, for example, zero-rated services where some internet access, limited internet access, will be provided for free. The idea of that internet access being provided by players like Airtel, like Facebook, like others providing zero-rated services, is that it will give people a taste of what they're missing, of how the internet might change their lives and bring them online. And there are questions about whether that's happening and questions about the regulatory implications of doing that. But this argument about free services is one that's highly topical. On a personal note, I always think that free for life can create some challenges. I think there are questions over value. I think there will certainly be questions over how much can then be invested in the sector if you provide something for free on a long-term basis. So I think the idea is what you want to have is an affordable level of access and affordable service to provide. And I think those are the two questions that were most pertinent for me. So
awesome. Thank you, Coach.
I'll answer the question on infrastructure sharing. So broadly, the mobile operators have been sharing from inception, most of them. So they started by sharing the base stations, and some of them have sold their base stations, and those sites are now owned by tower companies who then lease it out to any operator that wants to provide service there. The issue, though, is that the active infrastructure is usually cannot be shared because of legislation. So legislation prevents sharing of spectrum, for instance. So each operator needs a license with a specific spectrum that they can use. They cannot share it with other operators. So if you want to go further with sharing, then you need to look at the legislative framework, amending that. But right now, passive infrastructure sharing is being practiced in the mobile industry in terms of the base station, even in the fiber networks. We have some companies that their business is just to build networks and they provide services to carriers, so they are the carrier of carriers. They don't provide retail services. So it's a shared network basically that they build. In terms of the USF, yes, some of the funds have been misused. Operators, some of them have received the funds and have not done what they were supposed to do, but that's a failure of management of the fund. So if you are giving funds to someone and you're quite clear on what they need to do, you would have a contract to say, this is what we expect you to do, this is how much we're going to give you, and what time frame they need to do it within. So if they don't meet the requirements of the contract, there's recourse through the courts, for instance, or through legislation, that you claw back the funds or some other way. You force them to do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, to answer the question, I think it's very important to know that the role of ICANN in the ecosystem is very limited. If I want to, how many people know about the IANA transition in this world? When we talk about IANA transition, very few people, but it's very, very important for our life. So just to summarize that, in 2014, we have what we call the IANA function supervision by NTIA. So internet, you know, all of us, you know that it started in the US. But at sometimes the ICANN called the community for input to talk about this function supervision. So very few people from Africa were involved in the process. So I just want to come to the point that we don't know too much about the role of ICANN. It's very limited. So ICANN is in terms of Internet of Things, IPv4, IPv6. What we are doing now in our department, we call the Global Stakeholder Engagement Department, is to make more outreach to the community, because everybody in the ICANN multi-stakeholder model, everybody has a role to play. If you talk about IP addresses, for example, we have a register in Africa that we call AFRENI. But in most of our countries, when you get an internet connection, some provider will tell you to pay for the IP addresses. But it's clear that if you are an organization in a country, you have a limited number of equipment or devices, you can directly get access from AFRENI to get a block of IP addresses. So this is something many people don't know, and people are still trying to sell addresses to people. This is related to internet IP addresses. Also about domain names. ICANN is playing a role very limited, where we can give the delegation to the names for the generic and for the country code. So we are trying to organize all this, and this is why we are coming to all these meetings. So I have some flyers on ICANN. You'll see that we have a CEO, which is Fadi Shehade. It's no more the new CEO of ICANN, so we have a new CEO. So we are trying to do more outreach so that people know about what ICANN and the role they have to play. We have a workshop in Zimbabwe, Harare, next month, on 9 and 10 in Harare, to talk about the emerging issue in the domain name in this industry era. ICANN is not only for technical people, it's for everybody. Everybody has to know. We have the role of lawyers, of the civil society, of everybody. So we can talk later, and then we can see more that everybody has a role to play for the development of the domain name industry.
Thank you very much. I think we're rapidly running out of time.
Can you give us your takeaways, some of your key impressions from this panel, about some of your submissions?
I'm going to ask each panelist one question, and a short, sharp answer is required because we've run out of time. I want to thank the audience for their questions as well. But if there's one thing that either the private or the public sector could do that would have the biggest impact on closing the digital gap and the digital divide, what would it be? So,
my answer is to be involved in the ICANN community, the private sector. That's a very, very important thing to play. Thank you.
Thank you. Baltimore.
It's a supportive regulatory environment.
Pleasure.
I'm going to cheat. I'm greedy. So I'm completely the same as Mortimer, but to unpack that is to basically not kill your chickens or break your eggs before they hatch. We've made some major developments in terms of our understanding of what sort of policy and regulation is needed, in terms of sharing, in terms of our understanding of what the correct kind of spectrum management is, in terms of our understanding of how we undermine, circumscribe our ICT sectors and access through sector-specific taxation, through taxing devices, which creates black markets and stops people gaining access to it. We understand some of the steps we can create to have better universal service funds, to have better public access so those who can't afford can access. All of these are policy and regulatory steps that we can take and are part of an enabled environment. So a short answer, creating that enabled environment.
Brilliant. So I'd like you to join me in thanking the panel for their participation this morning.
thanks Jeremy, thanks Mortimer, and thanks King for a fantastic panel discussion. Mortimer has also prepared a presentation which we'll be very happy to share with you afterwards on the conference website, and all the other panelists also will have presentations to share. We now move to another section before the coffee break, which is solution showcases. Can you bring up the slide of the solution showcases, please, Dennis? We have 5 solution showcases from Hughes Network, Redknee, Marriott, Tadaran, and Rack Center. So let me first invite Willie Linga from Hughes Network Systems to please come up on stage. Willie, are you here? Okay, if Willie's not here, let's move on to Danny Rahal. Is Danny Rahal here? Danny Rahal from Redknee? Yes. Can we have Danny's presentation on the center screen, please? This is Miriam. Sorry, Redknee. Yeah, on the stage. So this is going to be a short and sweet, to the point solution showcase pitch by Danny Rahal from Redknee.
Good morning. So it's only 5 minutes, right? So no questions, please. I'll take as much as possible of this time to convey what Redknee is doing. My name is Danny Rahal. I'm the sales director for Redknee, responsible for Africa region. I have been working in Africa for several years. I have personal experience in Nigeria as well for 4 to 5 years. So we believe in this market a lot. We as Redknee, first of all, our mission is to enable the monetization of the digital environment of nowadays. So our solution is looking not only for today, but for the future, of course. So our focus is really in Africa. We have a global presence all over the world, and we're serving a lot of big customers like Vodafone, Vodacom in Africa, Digicel, and we're creating a lot of revenue streams in this area. So in fact, we are serving nowadays more than 250 customers. We have about 1,800 employees, and we're doing 24 billion transactions per day, which is huge in our environment. Our focus is again to increase or create new revenue stream in the digital areas. So that's why we're focusing nowadays on the smart pricing. We're focusing as well on the Internet of Things, which is the new trend in this market. And we're providing the solution, Redknee is providing the solution to our client, not only for today, for the future. So we are active already in the Internet of Things in several countries around the globe. With Digicel, for example, so our customers in Digicel are using the mobile phone to do prepaid transactions, to create their own, let's say, area and self-care environment. We're providing BMW with connected suits and to their digital platforms. So we're monetizing their offering in their cars. And this is something a lot of operators, especially the big groups like MTN, is willing to do in Africa as well. So Africa is really demanding market, and we are really trying our best to be all over Africa. We have offices already in South Africa, in Nigeria hopefully very soon, in Ethiopia as well very soon, and of course in Kenya and North Africa. I think I'll leave like 2 minutes for some questions. If anybody has any questions for more elaboration.
Questions offline. So when you have 2 minutes to talk, you can talk more for 2 minutes.
Okay. So that's all in brief about Redknee, and I'm here today. So in anyone who wants to know better about Redknee, so I'm ready to help and convey much more and elaborate on our business and strategy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. That's Danny Rahal, Sales Director for Africa for Redknee. Do we have Willie Linga in the room? Willie, if you're here, please come up. If not, let us hear from Fabian Delano, GM from Marriott. Can you please come up on stage? And can we get the Marriott presentation on the center screen, please? Center screen. Round of applause, please, for the second solution showcase presenter, Fabian. Marriott, not Redknee.
Hi there, I'm Fabian Delano, I'm General Manager for Marriott Connect. Thanks a lot for showing our slide earlier, where we took a lot of time putting it together. We're a digital inclusion company, and what we mean by that is we enable Web 2.0 services to people who don't have access to data. And our portfolio includes lots of things, from USSD gateways, USSD services, campaign management platforms, to mobile wallets for the mobile financial services industry. And we're here to talk to you about USSD App Store. So why do we want to talk about USSD? I think the answer is very clear. We've talked a lot about digital divide over the past couple of days. As you know, 80% of people who have access to a phone don't have easy, affordable access to mobile internet. And we think that USSD is a pragmatic solution to that problem today. Why innovation? USSD has been around for a long, long time. We've got startups, we've got banks, NGOs, developers who talk to us and tell us that it's not easy to create USSD services. It takes a lot of time, you have to integrate with all the operators, and although the solution is there, it's not something easy to do. So we've put together a USSD hub. It's available in 40 countries around the globe. In Africa, we're very present in French-speaking countries, not yet in Nigeria, but we're working very, very hard to enable that over the next few months. And innovation is a sense of the tools that we provide. We've got service creation environments that are very simple for developers who create new services. We've got campaign tools. We can help with shortcodes, etc., etc. And in terms of content, we've got a lot of content that's available. That's available to be developed in a lot of countries. We work a lot with Facebook. We've got Facebook over USSD. That's available in a lot of countries. It gives a first taste of Facebook for users who don't have access to data. We work with Wikipedia, we work with Go.com, but we also understand that the importance of local content. We're talking a lot to startups, developers. Tomorrow we're in Lagos to talk to the startup scene at Mobile West Africa, and we believe that it's extremely important. So why are we here? Very, very quickly, we want to talk to NGOs and social inclusion people. We can help. We want to talk to mobile network operators. You guys have told us that you want to enable vast services fairly quickly. And we want to talk to regulators. We know Nigeria is a great country in terms of getting USSD shortcodes. It's not the case everywhere around Africa, but even in Nigeria, the startups tell us that there's still a long way to go. So thanks a lot. Jocelyn, my colleague, and I are here for the rest of the day, and we look forward to having some great discussions. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabian. That is Fabian from Media. We will be attached to look at local inclusion issues. Let me now invite Dima Tights to come up. Dima is in the audience. He was definitely here at the party last night. Dima from Canada and Telecom. If not, let me ask Ayotunde Kokar from RAC Center to come up on stage. Do we have Ayokoki Kokar from RAC Center? Yes, please come up on stage. Our last solution showcase is from Ayotunde Kokar from RAC Center, MD of RAC Center. A round of applause, please, for Ayotunde.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and many thanks for this opportunity to tell you about a RAC Center and the industry. How much time do I have? 5 minutes, okay. Well, RAC Center, if you haven't heard about it, we've got a page taken in the brochure, is the one truly carrier-neutral data center in West Africa. It's the premium data center in West Africa. We have about the largest carrier-neutral available rack space of about 255 racks, power capacity of 750 kilowatts. What does that mean? Carrier neutrality means that every large carrier in the country is connected to RAC Center, including a few internet services providers. So, broad-based internet solutions, Vodacom, Mainone, MTN, Glo, Etisalat, Airtel. So that's a point where if you are co-located at RAC Center, you have access immediately to all of the key providers. Rack Center also hosts the Internet Exchange Point of Nigeria. Therefore, if you're paired there, you have immediate low latency capability for content that's generated locally. You do not have to trip all over the world to get your content, and of course the latency issues that goes with it. We see significant growth in the industry. Rack Center is owned by Jagal. Jagal is a leading conglomerate, Nigerian. It's truly Nigerian, proudly Nigerian, 100% owned by Jagal. They're highly diversified into oil and gas, fabrication. They own Snake Island, the free trade zone. So we're in good company. Our ethos is of the highest quality. This is evidenced by Rack Center having won the Data Center Dynamics Award in the UK last December for the impact category, and a finalist for the modular category. The only African country ever to have achieved that accolade. It isn't just about Rack Center, it's also about Nigeria, it's also about Africa, us showing up in the world for being able to deliver world-class capability in Africa here, and it's truly recognized. We have also had a few other awards. We are making great progress. We host, any great brand hosts a Rack Center, international brands as well. We have access to all 5 undersea cables. So in hosting a Rack Center, you have services that can be effectively delivered all over West Africa. This also gives us an opportunity to deliver infrastructure to the whole of West Africa and the African coast. As we also deliver other services with satellite-based communications, it allows us to deliver co-location services to other hinterland countries. So that delivers key infrastructure that in Africa we need to deliver the technology revolution that's going on. We've had all of the conversations around fiber and so on. This is going to grow, and we see it as an industry that will explode. Why would you want to build a data center? It costs you a significant amount of money to build a data center. If you're a big bank, it could be $4, $5, $6, $10 million. You have to put that money in the front end of your business, where they actually give you the earning assets that you build, not in the back end. Of course, it's important. Therefore, you have to co-locate with a credible organization like Rack Center. One thing to also put into perspective is this: you can go live within weeks, not a matter of going live in 18 months or 2 years, and you can scale your business in line. You can scale your technology in line with your business. A key thing here also is the explosion that we're seeing. We've talked about it with respect to content. There are more smartphones. The number of smartphones being imported into Africa now has overtaken the basic phones for the first time last year. The demand for content is going to be great. The other key thing here is that if your data center is down, everybody knows your business is down. It's a terrible distraction building one. It's incredibly distracting trying to run one, being awake at night. Lots of CIOs will say, I wish I could sleep at night. Well, we help people sleep at night while delivering significant. I wake up and our core competence is to make data centers work to world class, to operate 100% of the time. Rack Center was a first Tier 3 certified, design certified data center by the Uptime Institute in West Africa, and we continue to lead in innovation and in what we do. I'd be very happy to talk to you more. I think there are some significant collaborations we have. We collaborate with other service providers, Internet Solutions, for instance, Vodacom, for instance. Also, in Rack Center, we will deliver the GoDaddy of Nigeria, the cloud services here in Nigeria, the Rackspace type shared infrastructure capability. That means you do not have to take African foreign exchange out to the US or to Europe to consume services that you can actually use here, generate the jobs here in Africa, all at the same quality of anywhere in the world. I hope that's given you a good synopsis about Rack Center, and we'll be happy to discuss this with you over the next couple of days of the conference. Thank you very much. It's been a delight to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Ayotunde. That was Ayotunde Konga, MD of Rack Center. Last call for Dima Tights. Dima, if you're in the audience, please come up. If not, we take a break for coffee now. We come back at 11:45. At 11:45, there is a workshop by Oracle happening in the room just behind the back doors of this hall. And in this hall at 11:45, we have a panel. So enjoy your coffee break. Coffee served just outside this room. And enjoy your break and come back at 11:45 sharp. Thank you.